My name is Browne, and I'm currently the Managing Director of the NDRC Accelerator, and I'm here with Ian Browne, and Ian's the incoming MD. So as I transition out of this role, before we start the next Accelerator, we've got Ian coming in with a whole host of experience running Accelerator as well. So Ian, would you like to give us a little bit of your background maybe and what you've done prior?
Sure, no problem. I'm doing the opposite to Philip's doing, so I started off as an EIR on the Accelerator and then transitioned into the MD position next year, so we're kind of having a role reversal. But prior to that, I was a founder. So I founded my own company, grew it from nothing to kind of 4,000 customers, 20 million users, and sold it to a big US firm, and then wanted to give stuff back. So I was like, how can I help people? So I helped set up the Ignite program with a great team in Belfast, and we work with hundreds of early stage startups, put them through Accelerator programs, pre-Accelerator programs, introduced them to hundreds of investors, and went from kind of zero in year one really to last year the portfolio companies raising over close to £70 million in both pre-seed and seed capital. So like a very quick transition from like founder to kind of helping other founders to now like coming down here and joining up north and south, and I've been a big part of like helping NDRC with their programs over the last couple of years.
Super, yeah, and look, it's amazing to have Ian come in with all of that experience, I think, as well. And what we're going to do today is maybe just explore a little bit about, like, you know, what on earth is an accelerator? What's the benefit for hopefully you as a founder in kind of thinking about joining one? What does Ian bring to the table? And try and kind of unpack all that a little bit. So if I can kind of start, Ian, as I kind of ask you a little bit about, I mean, in your kind of accelerator is kind of this very amorphous thing, right? Where you're like, startups come in and then come out, and maybe kind of some of them raise some money, or they, you know, how do you think about the benefits for an early stage founder of going through an accelerator?
There are a lot of benefits, right? Like building a company is hard. Like it's hard, and a lot of people are doing this by themselves. They're like maybe 1, 2 people at this early stage of stuff, and you'll get a lot of advice. You'll get a lot of advice from people that don't necessarily know what they're doing or haven't done stuff before, and like so like an accelerator program is somewhere where that advice becomes relevant, structured, and actually like based on experience of what's gone before that stuff. So like you're going to come in and work with maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 people who are all at the same stage as you, and so you're going to work as a cohort together. You're going to bounce stuff off each other, and then you're going to get a lot of opinions, but they are actually informed opinions at this point, right? From like previous founders, investors, mentors. Like we've got a huge bank of those now, and I know that that's been one of the big cohorts of the last programs down here. And so to kind of that cohort effect combined with the knowledge that comes in there is certainly something that I've seen like massively benefit founders. And you're not only getting the cohort of this year, you're getting the wider network of everyone in that stuff. So you got a question about something, you need advice about something, you just want to talk to someone, there's always someone there to help you. And so the people side of the accelerator stuff is actually the most beneficial part of it. People will focus on the money all the time. It's like that's why a lot of people tend to apply to this stuff. And if you speak to people who've been through programs before, it's often like the least important thing of why they've done it.
Yeah. So we've got these kind of 2 roles, I guess, kind of core roles that kind of surround the startups and help them. One is the EIR, the Entrepreneur in Residence, which is a really fancy title, effectively, right? And the other being kind of the Managing Director. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, your experience of kind of like what the MD does, what the EIR does, and how, and kind of what various guises and ways that they help the founders that come through?
Yeah, I guess there's a team in the accelerator, right? And kind of the relationship between like the AMD or the person who's going to run the program, the teams, is very close. Like it's almost like you're becoming an additional co-founder of the startup for the period of time to do that through the program. And so like it's my job to kind of help challenge assumptions, help with every aspect of the business. We're going to try and take stuff apart and then try and put it back together again. And the MD relationship, so we kind of add on to that. But the EIRs are there like to help, and they like take, like nobody knows everything, right? So it's like we pull on people that have different skill sets, like Philip, who's going to be the EIR this year, and they really add this extra level of knowledge beyond like that core team that delivers this stuff, and it gives diversity of opinion, accountability, support, like, and actually like they also become part of the team as well, right? So kind of you have this like super, you know, it's like a supercharged team that gets added to your team for the duration of the program, right? And people have experience of networks, and one thing you do notice that anyone involved in this stuff, like it's very founder first. It's like everyone's very open. We'll always, like, you ask for an introduction, we'll make the introduction, or we'll suggest stuff for you. And that comes with that EIR piece, which is like basically like every node in the network adds more people to it.
And out of curiosity, for the founders who come through it, well, what's the biggest piece of feedback that you get? Because I think how we advertise sometimes the accelerators, there's obviously an investment with the accelerator that we do as well. There's a whole bunch of perks. But as the founders come out the other side of the accelerator, maybe with the benefit of hindsight, what are the things that they talk about that were the biggest impacts to them?
So let me give you an example, actually. So one of the kind of founders I worked with kind of 3-4 years ago, it was a company called Cloudsmith, who are from Belfast, and they told me the reason they applied for the accelerator was that they got AWS credits, right? And they were pretty honest about it right afterwards. This was after we'd selected them. But then by the end of the program, like couldn't have been like the least important part of it, because they had like restructured how they were talking about the business, and like, you know, I'm taking no credit for their progress, right? Like it was all them. But what we were able to do is like provide a bunch of investor introductions to them at the end of the program based on the kind of progress they've made, and one of those turned into like a seed investment, and then they've just kind of gone on and on and on, and like last year raised 15 million Series A from Tiger Global, amongst others, right? Yeah. So it's like kind of what you get out of it is not necessarily what you think you're going to get out of it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Interesting. And in terms of timing as well, you know, some of the commentary we'll hear when we talk to early stage founders is, look, I've already raised a little bit of money, right? Like, and isn't the accelerator for people who, you know, need to raise, and I've already maybe done a raise recently. How would you think about that if you were an early stage founder?
Yeah, no, I've heard that before. I think probably we've worked with about half of every cohort has generally raised some money at some point. And like when you raise money, you're kind of trying to get to the next inflection point, right? And sometimes it's hard, right? So it's like you kind of raise some money, you think, oh great, everything's going to go well, and it's like, actually, like we're not quite sure how to do the next bit. And so this comes back to one of the core strengths of the EIR stuff, is we plug in a very strong kind of go-to-market and sales strategy on top of that stuff, and that's like equally, if not more important than the investment stuff that comes inside of that. So like, although you've already got some capital, you then need to like exercise that capital to get you to the next inflection point, right? And I think that bit is like massively underappreciated, and that bit is like one of the core bits of any accelerator program.
Yeah, interesting. And if you were to give advice to some of the founders who are thinking about applying for it, and they want to put their best foot forward, like what would you say? What should they be highlighting? How should they think about that process?
Well, I mean, like we're making investments in companies, right? So like you should probably think about the application in the same way that you would think about how am I going to pitch this to an investor, right? Like, so how does, like, I want ambition, right? I don't want people who are just like, oh, I'm just going to do this and do this. Like, we want ambition. We want like a really big outcomes to this for the founders, right? Like, so maybe just think about this in terms of like how I would approach an investor as well. So like, what's the real market opportunity? Like, not where am I going to be now, where am I going to be in 5 years? Like, what's the big picture stuff in there? Because that's really interesting. Yeah. So I think like if you approach it a bit more like that, you know, I think, you know, we evaluate everyone that comes through this door, but we bring a lot of external people to help with that stuff, like, and that's the stuff that's really going to help you get noticed.
Yeah, interesting. And maybe the flip side of that question as well, are there particular things that you see that maybe founders don't help themselves through the interview process, or that they can fall down, or patterns of, you know, people maybe highlighting the wrong things or kind of emphasizing the wrong things?
So, like I've seen hundreds and hundreds of applications for them, and there's maybe, of the hundreds that I've seen, there are maybe less than a dozen who have like accurately described themselves well in one sentence. Right, so actually, like over explaining stuff at the start tends to be confusing. So like, try and condense the answers. Like, you know, we have to access it. We have to kind of look through all the applications. Brevity will be rewarded, right? But no, generally it's about communicating. Like, so it's like really trying to get the message across and make sure that what you're going through is joined up through the whole thing. So it makes it easy for us to understand what the team's like how you're going to build this stuff, what's the next 12 months look like. You know, that's really important. So like, communicating is the biggest thing.
Brilliant. All right, cool. Well, look, let's switch gears a little bit here, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the market. So, public markets, I don't know if anyone's been looking at their stock app on their iPhone recently, but there's a lot of red, basically, particularly in tech stocks right now. You know, that's obviously kind of much later stuff, and obviously a lot of that is being kind of reflected in the US market as well. You're helping a lot of companies out there kind of you know, go out and raise money. You know, how would you think about that? If you're an early stage founder and you're looking to go out and raise capital right now, you know, there's a lot of scary thoughts. We're seeing kind of some early signs of layoffs being announced. Like, how do you look at that macro landscape? And if you're a founder looking to go out and raise money right now, does that change your perspective on how you approach things, or how would you think about the business right now?
For sure, it absolutely does. Like, there are second order consequences of the stuff that's happening now. And there's a lag in time of what happens in here. Like, most likely, you know, there's panic in the short term by a lot of people, and it's fine, right? Like, but it's mostly because people are trying to think, like, if you're talking about investors in general, it's like, well, they've got a portfolio of companies they need to look at now. There's probably going to be at a time where there's going to be a lot of market uncertainty. There's going to be nobody's going to be quite sure what's happening in the second half of this year, so they're probably just going to be a bit conservative in the short term, right? So like, kind of maybe in the next sort of three to sort of 6 months, it's going to be an interesting time to try and raise at any level, right? Like, even though I don't expect these kind of knock-on effects to go deep down into pre-seed and seed level, right? I think you'll probably see some adjustments in the valuations of companies, and that's, like, to be honest, in the last couple of years, that's probably a sensible thing, right? Because there's been some people getting ahead of their skis. But I think if you've got the opportunity to kind of close a deal at the moment, it feels like that you should probably focus on closing that deal right now, right? But I think the kind of larger pieces, like my personal opinion is, I think it'll probably settle, but it'll be the second half of this year will be like the optimum time for kind of companies at pre-seed level to be raising money, right? And that's it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, likewise. I think you know, occasionally you'll see people use, you know, the windows where the kind of market opens for VC money, like in the spring and the autumn, kind of traditionally, right? Kind of avoiding the summer when a lot of institutional money's off on vacation. And I think, you know, when you talk to a few people where their runway maybe stops in the autumn, they were planning to go ahead and raise now. I think some of the conversations that are happening at the later stage are probably prudent to be happening at the earlier stage as well, which is that, look, how do I extend my runway? Like, does it maybe make sense to just put a couple of angel checks on a safe effectively in the bank and just, you know, give me enough runway to get into Q1 or Q2 next year? Just being prudent and kind of thinking about it. I think certainly for early stage, you know, we're not seeing the same effects as we see at the Series A, Series B, and Series C level. But I think it's worth thinking through, you know, if I had to pull a lever here, how would I do it? And so even scenario planning effectively kind of out, which is, you know, how should I think about just, you know, managing my burn over the course of the next kind of 6-9 months effectively? When do I run out of runway? Being really crisp on what your expenses are, being thoughtful about hiring, closing deals when you have them. I mean, it's the basic stuff that we should all be doing, but it's kind of like, you know, it sometimes it can, you know, we need to focus back on the basics again, really, and hopefully just have a very clear understanding of, you know, your job number one. If you know, we're in the early signs of anything, I don't think we want to call anything just yet in terms of a recession or, you know, massive economic impact. But I also think that your job number one, if we do enter into, you know, a downturn, is to not die, right? And after that, you know, everything after that can be done, but unfortunately if the company goes to zero, there's nothing else that can happen. And so kind of protecting against the downside of that, to me, feels like the most
totally. Like understanding your cash flow could not be more important right now, right? Like, that's it. And that's one thing actually I found with a lot of startup founders, is that they don't tend to manage that stuff terribly well. And one thing that I do is like that you should do a lot of that kind of spreadsheet modeling early, like, and understand this really well, that you know when day zero is, right? So it's like the default dead alive thing, right? Really understand when that is, and now it's never been a more well, never, but right now is an important time to understand that stuff.
Super, brilliant. Well, look, out of curiosity, in terms of maybe kind of closer to home in terms of the Irish landscape as well, how do you think about you know, access to capital on this island for companies that want, you know, global ambition? We're obviously, it feels like we're at maybe a little bit of a turning point, or there's kind of different signals coming out. But like, if you're an Irish founder and, you know, you're thinking about building a big, globally ambitious business, you know, how do you think about the island of Ireland, how it's positioned kind of either within Europe or access to capital within the US, access to talent and those kind of things? Like, what have you, like, in terms of mindset and approach, if you like, it kind of feels to me like we've seen maybe a little bit of a different mindset and approach over the last number of years than we've maybe seen historically. I'm just curious if that resonates and whether you have any kind of commentary on that.
No, it absolutely does resonate. I think, like, you know, obviously the sort of COVID forced window of like change for everyone in there has like taken away the borders of capital massively, right? So like previously it was much more difficult to raise money like in any region that was outside a big urban tech center. Like it was difficult. Like you had to go there, you had to go on the train, you had to go on the plane, you had to fly there, do that stuff. Like that's all gone, right? Like, and now there's no problem with a VC in wherever, you know, the West Coast, Shanghai, wherever it might be, investing in companies that are now like, you know, like Ireland, right? So I think it like behooves founders to think like that, right? Like you have to think globally straight away, like not just about like, you know, the company and the product and that stuff, but like how you're going to raise money. Yeah. So I think a lot of that stuff has gone away, right? And so I think like Ireland now feels like a place of like much more opportunity than less, like a couple of years ago, right? So if you're kind of like as a place to start a company, I don't think that you could be better placed right now to do it in Ireland, right? So so I'm very, very optimistic.
I think Don Valentine, one of the original kind of founders of Sequoia, famously said, like, if you can't ride a bike to it, basically you don't put money into it, right? I mean that's the old school mentality, right? Like, no investor wanted to get on a plane to do a board meeting wherever, right? Whereas board meetings are now frequently happening effectively kind of virtually,
exclusively,
and that borderless. It is funny just how COVID has really helped with that, and that should be an opportunity, right, for Irish founders to kind of lean into as well.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, on the kind of same topic, how many businesses do you see that just maybe don't deliver on the potential ambitions to be that global kind of business? Maybe they look, for want of a better phrase, like they look a little bit too Irish, effectively, in their approach. And again, do you see that? Is there any kind of commentary on that? Is that a plus or a negative? I mean, there's a great starting market here sometimes, but maybe again,
sometimes, like, but I think that's the default path people take. Is like, oh, I'm going to start and test it here, and you have this default path that, like, that's what I'm going to do. But actually, like, your best first test market might be like the US, it might be South Africa, it might be Australia, it might be somewhere else. But so you've kind of got to remove that default path from your head, because it can actually really hurt your progress in there. And like, just one like thing we do, like kind of we did for a bunch of companies I was working with, was like they came in, and a few of them did have that kind of like more, oh, we're going to test this because we know some people that would do this stuff. And then I just got them to change all of their prices to dollars. And you get the mindset sort of straight away to be like, hang on, if we do, like, okay, so the US, what's about that? And so that evolves straight away. So I think we have to look beyond local. If you're going to build anything, like, you have to be like of a sizable nature that's venture backed. Like, you have to think outside Ireland. You have to think outside Europe, right? Like, so it's like you've got to think like up here, not down here. Now, sometimes you need to go through the local path to get there, but most of the time I find it quite restrictive.
Yeah. All right, brilliant. Well, look, we've got the Accelerator kind of coming up now, starting effectively, the next program starts in August.
Yeah, 1st of August.
Applications are open right now, and in fact, closing fairly soon in the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the application does require you to think through, how do you position your business, right? It's not kind of putting in your email, pressing submit, and so there's a little bit of thought that goes into it. I think we've had many people even come through that and say, actually, it was really interesting, the questions that were being asked as well. So it sounds like if anyone's interested in the Accelerator, they should hit the link, and we're going to make sure that gets up on the YouTube video itself, NDRC.ie. You can apply from there. And hopefully we'll have a link there you can kind of click on as well. And listen, look, thank you to Ian. Looking forward to working with you for the rest of the year. Kind of on the hip of him, of Ian as an EIR. And yeah, thanks a million for today. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the applications from some of the founders and early stage businesses we have here.
Perfect. Thanks, Philip.
All right.